Hello and welcome to another C3 Stingray video. Thanks to everyone that has subscribed to the channel so far. If you haven't done so, there's a little thing in the corner there you can click on to subscribe to the channel. I appreciate that. You can get notifications for when new videos come up. I got a request to rebuild a headlight motor out of an 88 to 96 Corvette. Now I've already done the 84 to 87 and I've also done the C5 Corvette, how to rebuild those motors. You can find those videos on my channel. But I never did the 88 to 96, so today I'm going to take the headlight out of this 89 Corvette and rebuild it, and let's get to it.
First we need to remove the whole headlight assembly. There will be two 10mm nuts there, two 10mm screws there, two more 10mm nuts on this side, along with a bracket that's held on with a 13mm nut right there. Just unplug the headlights. You have one plug going to the actual headlight itself and the other plug going to the headlight motor. Plugs will be different on different years. I'll show you more on that at the end of this video. Now we want to take this 13mm nut off. Once that's out of the way, we'll take the 10mm nut that's on top of this bracket, which will release the whole bracket. As you can see, the bracket just fell down there. Just grab a hold of that and pull it out of the way. Now I'm taking the two 10mm screws out. Now I take the whole assembly out in one piece. I mean, you could take the covers off, you could tape off areas. You can do what you think you need to do to keep it safe, like if you're worried about scratching or chipping or anything like that when you're taking it out. But I just like to take the whole unit out together. I think it's a lot easier, and I don't know, it's just easier. Now I'm loosening this nut up, but I'm not going to take this one all the way off. I leave it on there just to hold the whole assembly in there so it won't fall out. Because once you get all these nuts out, it'll just fall right out of place. There's nothing holding it there. So once I have this nut off, I'll put my hand on there and hold the whole unit up while I take the other nut off, and then I can just drop the whole assembly out in one piece. Now you need to remove this pin from the motor shaft that goes into the linkage. If you take a 5/16 punch, you can knock that out pretty easy. Now you need to get access to these T30 bolts that are on the base that are attached to that U-shaped bracket. Because you need to loosen these. You don't have to take them out, but you need to loosen these two bolts in order to get access to the bolts on the back of the motor. Now usually you can crank this and move this so you can position it so you can get to that back bolt a little easier. This one's hard to get to, but mine's so shot that it won't even move, so I'm kind of have to move it by hand. This one was so tight I had to put a ratchet on it. I just couldn't break it loose. I finally got it loose. You just need to loosen it enough so you can get access to these bolts on the back of the motor. I'll show you that in a second. See, there are two bolts back here. The top one's easily accessible, but the one on the bottom you can't get to unless you loosen those bolts to get it away from the bracket. So you can see it there on the bottom. Once you loosen that other bolt we were just doing, you can move that U-shaped bracket down and get access to that bolt. Once you have those two bolts out, there's only one more on the front that holds the motor on, and it's the only long bolt of the bunch. They're all T30 Torx, and this is the last bolt. Now you have to work the motor, that shaft, out of that linkage, and there's also a stop in between the shaft and that linkage. There's a stopper that stops the headlight when you're going up and down, stops the motor. You couldn't really see it, but I'll show it to you when we put it back together. Now there's 3/4 inch screws holding the cover on over the gear. Now there'll be washers, some on the top, some on the bottom of that shaft. You need to check when you're taking it apart how many washers there are, and remember to put it back the same way you took it apart. It's different on all of them. Some of them won't have any at all. As you can see, I just struck that whole shaft and that gear will pop right out. Now, there should be 3 bushings in there, but this one there's nothing in there. Here's another one I took out. There were only 2 bushings in this one for some reason. I don't know why, but that's what they should look like. You need to clean all the plastic debris and stuff out of there, get it all cleaned up. And this is the new gear from c3stingray.com that I sell for 20 bucks, and includes the gear and the 3 bushings, and that includes shipping. So if you want to check that out. And I need to take some grease and kind of grease everything up. I just use synthetic grease. This is a wheel bearing grease actually that I'm using here. Just need something in there. So I'm greasing up all the bushings, and then I'll put a little grease around the whole outside rim of the gear, and also on the inside, and the moving parts on the inside there. Now this, when you push this back into the gear, as you can see it's rounded, and they kind of go around those bushings. And once you get in position, you can just pop it back in. Sometimes you might have to use some channel locks or something to push it together. There will be a little bit of a lip there once it's together. Now we're about ready to put this in. Like I said, I greased up that little gear there, the turning part of the gear. It's not the gear but the shaft. And I put some around the edge of the whole gear itself. And I'm spinning it, just kind of testing it. Now you gotta remember to put your washers back in. However many there were 3 on this one, on one side. And there's a gasket that goes all the way around this cover. I didn't take the gasket off, the old gasket off, because it seemed to be fine, and it was stuck on there, and I knew I would have destroyed it if I tried to take it off, so I just left it on there and put it back together. And now I'm testing the motor itself. Now you don't have to do this, but I do it just because I want to make sure it works before I put it back together. I just put a couple alligator clips on the wires going to the motor and just give it power and see if she'll spin. So you can see it spinning there, and then you just reverse polarity and it will spin the opposite direction. Everything seems to be fine with that, so now we have to put it back on. Now before the shaft goes into that linkage, you need that stopper I was talking about. You couldn't really see when I took off. Here it is here, it just slides on. And as you can see, the arms are bent towards the motor, and you want it on top of that little bump there on the back, that little spot there, and that's the way it needs to be on. If you put it on a different way, it won't work. Your headlight won't come up all the way. It'll be an issue. Now I'm taking that punch and kind of lining up the hole on the shaft and the linkage, and I just kind of left that in there until I get the bolts started. Putting these bolts back into the back. Probably another reason why I test the motors, because once you have this together, if there's anything wrong, if you need to check it or fix it, you gotta take the whole thing apart again, so it's kind of a pain. As you can see now, I was cranking that manually and it was moving. Now I'm taking that punch out and I'm gonna put that roll pin in. Now these roll pins will break really easy. I'm just tapping it here. I'm doing this fast motion here, but I'm just barely tapping it and knocking it into place. If If for some reason you do break it, you can just go to a hardware store and get a 1/8 inch roll pin that's an inch long, and you can replace that. I mean, it won't cost hardly anything, but as you can see, we're cranking it now, and it's working now, where before it wouldn't even move when I cranked that manually. Now I gotta get access to that last bolt on the bottom to tighten that one up, and this is together after that. Now we're putting it back in. Now what I like to do is take 2 nuts and put one on this easily accessible one on that side, and then I put one on the bottom on the opposite side. I don't tighten them up, I just get them as finger tight, and then I just eyeball it and look to see where it's perfectly centered. And once I feel like I have it perfectly centered, then I'll tighten down the 2 nuts to hold it in place. I think this is the easiest way to get it lined up. And once it's tight, as you can see, it's perfectly centered. And it's just doing it by eyeball. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, this is a parts car, you're missing half the crap there, so you couldn't do that. But let's walk over to my 84, which is completely assembled. And you can see everything's still accessible. You can see really well. Now we're testing the headlight. I have to wire it directly to the battery since I don't have any power, so as you can see, everything's working great. Now if you've done everything and your headlight still doesn't work, there's a couple things you can check. First is that stop we were talking about. If it's not in that position, if you put it like straddling that little bump there, the headlight will only come up like halfway. It won't come up all the way. And so if that happens, your stop is probably not in the right position. Another problem I've seen is, as you can see, these shafts will knock out of where this gear goes into, and there's little splines on the shafts and little splines on the inside of that. And the splines on this one were really worn down, and the inside, when you looked at it, it was completely smooth, and you could actually see metal around the edge where it was ground up. So once the shaft was in there, even though it felt like it was in there tight, once the motor was on there and the pressure was on it, that shaft was just spinning inside. So the headlight motor was spinning, but the headlight itself was not going up or down. So it's something to check. It's a rare thing, but it's something to check if you're having issues. Just for a reference point, here are the plug-ins for the 3 headlights. This is an 84 through 87. Here's an 88 through 90. This is what we just did. And there's also the 91 through 96. If you want to go from 88 through 96, you could use that on any of them. You would just have to alter the wiring to make them work. And by altering, I mean you either need to switch the plugs, or you could wire direct if you wanted to and make it work.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this C3 Stingray video. This will probably be the last video I do on this 89 Corvette, because I really need to get this thing apart and out of here. But I do have a 96 Corvette that is complete. So if there's like some future project you're thinking about working on, or there's something you just wanted to know how it comes apart, send me a message and let me know that's what you'd like to see, and maybe I can make that a future video. But if you need any used C3, C4, C5 Corvette parts and some new parts, including that headlight gear that I was showing for this 88 through 96 Corvette, the headlight gear with the bushings, I sell that on the site brand new for 20 bucks, and that includes shipping. And also sell the gears for the 84 through 87 and the C5 Corvette. So check out the website at c3stingray.com and be sure to subscribe to the channel. And I guess that's it. I will see you on the road.